Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Arfan and welcome to a brand new video. I've been away for quite some time. I've been writing an essay, and inshallah it'll be done maybe in the next 3 months or 4 months or so. But yeah, so recently, in fact, very recently, and by that I meant this afternoon, I watched a video of someone speaking in tongue. It was on YouTube, and that gave me an idea. So I was researching, and I found that speaking in tongue, based on the book of Acts, chapter 2, right, for example, verses 1 to 13, does not mean speaking in languages that is not discernible by the church congregants. Right? So speaking in tongues basically means that when the apostles were given the merit to speak in tongues, or they were inspired by the Holy Spirit to speak in tongues, right? It was mentioned that these people were able to speak in languages that they are not native of, right? They are able to speak in Arabic, they are able to speak in languages that they are not native of. And so they are basically speaking in languages that is a language and not some gibberish that you mostly found in churches nowadays. And so I could pull up all the critical commentaries, but this time around I decided to go to the evangelical literatures and see what their scholars themselves have to say. Right? And so I pull up the NIV Study Bible, and I also pull up the MacArthur Study Bible. Right? Just I think these two commentary would suffice. And so we're going to go to Acts chapter 2, and we're going to read what speaking in tongues basically means. Now I've read this in advance already. Right? So we're going to read the text. I'm going to read to you from the NIV. And this is the book of Acts chapter 2. And the title is The Holy Spirit Comes at Pentecost. When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in tongues. Right? And began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them. Now there were staying in Jerusalem God-fearing Jews from every nation under heaven. When they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment because each one heard their own language being spoken. Utterly amazed, they asked, "And all these who are speaking Galileans?" Right? Then how is it that each of us hears them in our native language? Parthians, Medes, and Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and parts of Libya near Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Jews and converts to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs. We hear them declaring the wonders of God in our own tongues. Amazed and perplexed, they asked one another, "What does this mean?" Okay, some, however, made fun of them and said they have too much wine. Right? Now, this could be an euphemism for something else, right? But it could also be taken literally that they were drunk and they are able to speak in languages that they have never heard of or have never learned before, right? So this is less likely the case because when you're drunk, you speak nonsense instead of speaking in actual languages that you've never learned before, right? For example, Latin or Aramaic, for example, right? So people who are drunk and they've never learned Aramaic, they'll never speak in Aramaic, right? So this is a euphemism for maybe they have been given, all right? They have been given, just like the Gospel of John. Basically, they have too much wine to drink. It could also mean that they have too much Holy Spirit in them, right? But whatever it is, that's not the passage of our concern. So, as I've just read, you found many sentences or verses that actually make sense, that actually leads one to interpret that speaking in tongues basically means not speaking in gibberish, right? The kind of gibberish that you find in Pentecostal church today, whereby the congregants have no idea what the clergyman or woman are actually speaking, right? And so there's tons of these videos that I've watched, and the comment sections, the champion of criticizing the clergyman or woman, right? And so let's hear what scholars have to say here. Speaking in tongue. Okay, we just go straight to the passage of concern, right? And so, heard their own languages. Right? The Jews heard the believers speak in languages native to the different places from which they had come. Right? And so, if we move up further, this is from page 1898, by the way. Okay. The Spirit enabled them to speak in languages they had not previously learned. Right? The gift had particular relevance here, where people of different nationalities and languages were gathered. There's only two other examples in the New Testament, and it is found in the book of Acts. Right? All speaking in tongues came from the book of Acts. Right? And so this is speaking in languages that is, actually real languages and not just some gibberish. We'll move to MacArthur. Right? Go to the same passage, the book of Acts. And so I'm not going to read to you the passage. We're just going to read to you the commentary here. This is from page 1407, the MacArthur Study Bible. Okay. With other tongues, right? Known languages, not aesthetic utterances, like what we found in some of these videos have surfaced on YouTube about a church, about the clergyman or woman in the Pentecostal churches speaking in aesthetic utterances. Right? These languages given by the Spirit were a sign of judgment to unbelieving Israel. Right? They also showed that from then on, God's people would come from all nations and mark the transition from Israel to the church. Tongue speaking occurs only twice more in the book of Acts. Right? And so we move on here to the next part of the note. Speak in his own language. As the believers were speaking, each pilgrim in the crowd recognized the language or dialect from his own country. Right? And so, if you speak in gibberish, like some of these videos that have surfaced on YouTube, there's no benefit to the Spirit in you. Right? That doesn't prove that you have the Holy Spirit. And so the apostles, if we trust the book of Acts, right, they were given the gift of the Holy Spirit in that they are able to speak in languages that they are not native of. Right? And so when people of that native languages came to Jerusalem in the day of Pentecost, they are able to hear the apostles speaking in their own languages. And these were Galileans. They have not learned Arabic, they have not learned Parthians, they have not learned African, they have not learned Coptic, Syriac, whatever it is. And so they're able to speak in these languages. And so this is proof that the apostles have been given the Holy Spirit. Right? And so to test whether the modern clergyman or woman, they claim that they have the Spirit, and to test whether they really have the Spirit, if the Spirit is acting in them, if the Holy Spirit is acting in them, then we should ask them to speak in languages that they have never learned before. Right? There's 2,000 over languages spoken in the world today or more. Right? And if they really have the Holy Spirit, then ask them to speak Zimbabwe, for example, and ask them to speak, I don't know, ancient languages or even languages, dialect, for example, in certain parts in the world. And so if they're not able to do so, then basically they don't have the gift of the Holy Spirit. Right? And so yeah, I mean, there's many more interpretation to this speaking in tongues. And if you go to the Hermeneia commentary on Acts, if you go to Anchor Yale Bible commentary on Acts, right, they also proves that this is actually speaking in tongues basically mean to speak in languages that you have never learned, but you are able to do so because the Holy Spirit is acting in you. Right? And so it is not gibberish that we found in modern Pentecostal churches. I've never been to one. Obviously, I'm not a Christian, but there's tons of these videos on YouTube whereby they're actually not speaking in any languages. Rather, they're speaking in aesthetic utterances. Right? And so, a short one from me today, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.